Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Spanish United Radio. This is Enrique Sanchez, founder director of Spanish United, and we have a returning guest who was previously on our show a while back ago. Would you be kind enough to introduce yourself to the audience, please?
Hi, I'm Rabbi Mark Sobel, and I'm honored to be asked to be here again.
Welcome. Thank you so much for being on the show, Rabbi.
Oh, you're more than welcome, Enrique. More than welcome.
Yeah, today's topic is going to be a little bit controversial, and the reason why I say it's controversial because it is a topic that it exists, but many people don't want to talk about it. And the topic of this night's evening has to do with Hispanic anti-Semitism and the Jewish community. As many people know, there's anti-Semitism takes different forms. There's Christian anti-Semitism, there's Islamic anti-Semitism, there's anti-Semitism among the African American community, and just among, different people. But Hispanic anti-Semitism is a phenomenon that doesn't really spoken about, particularly because Hispanics are not a race, they're an ethnicity. But the reason why I want to bring it up, because especially now where we have a Jewish president that's in Mexico, and the fact that many Hispanics have fled from a capitalist libertarian system, which many Jews, Arabs, or other minorities, hold most of the wealth. So many Hispanics that come to the United States as immigrants feel that they're not moving forward and they have a resentment, and particularly with the Jewish community in the United States. So, Rabbi, on this topic, what are your views and your opinions on of Hispanic anti-Semitism, or if you are aware of Hispanic anti-Semitism within the Hispanic community towards the Jewish community?
Well, I think there's a difference between the Spanish American community and the American Jewish community. I think both groups have lived together. Both of them have seen slights and racism. And I think in many cases, the Jewish community, in part, has led the way through teaching and social work and things of that nature. I also believe that just living in America, you understand that there's room for everybody. But I think the immigrant population comes from areas where, and as you said, where Jews owned businesses have done well. Many of the Jewish community outside the United States came there right after World War II.
Right.
In their quest to come into America, they got stopped at the border, and several borders. And so rather than not have income for the families, they set up small businesses. Now,
Right.
that would be the areas closest, like Tijuana and things.
Mm-hmm. Correct. Hello? 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 Mark? Hello? Oh, we kind of lost you. So can you repeat what you were saying, Mark? Hello? Hello?
Hello, can you hear
Yeah,
me?
yeah, I heard you fine. Can you repeat what you were saying? We kind of lost you there.
Sure. What I was saying was a lot of anti-Semitism comes from people who have lived in the old country,
Right.
whether it is parts of Latin America or Armenia. I had a student here in the public school here tell me, why did the Jews kill Jesus? And I was stunned. I had never heard that from an Armenian before.
Right.
And I said, where did you hear it? Because I thought if it had come from his priest, I was going to go, have a long talk with the priest. He said, no, my grandmother told us. And of course, she was born, or not, but she was born in Armenia.
Right.
And I think there's a parallel with people who are coming. Now, many of the people who have come to America are not wealthy city people. And that's not just now. America is known for people coming who are not wealthy. But the point is in some of these towns, the clergy may or may not be enlightened. I'm trying to be as charitable as I can,
Sure.
and may just spew these types of things, and then the people who come across the border to America are just repeating what they had heard, and in a town, the clergy, whether it's a Jewish town or a Christian town or a Muslim town, the clergy have respect and power, and
Right.
we know that in many cases today clergy can have every credential they want as clergy, but it doesn't mean that they're not racist or sexist or other things. So
Right.
that's, I think, a great deal of it is now why the Jewish community doesn't deal with Spanish anti-Semitism. I think they do in the areas where Jews have become landlords.
Right.
And the people who own who are renting apartments are considering them to be slumlords,
Right.
and I don't think they're wrong necessarily. Why the general Jewish community doesn't deal with it? I think because you know what I said before. American Latinos, Hispanics. I'm still not up on the nomenclature
Uh-huh.
exactly. Have seen we are in this together because we've all been victims of if you will, the white power structure in America.
Right.
We've all felt it,
Right.
and so that's it. But the new immigrants, they may never have seen a Jew, you know, and so they and it's easy to attack someone you don't know than the person who's working with you or who you have dealings with or who employs you.
Right.
So and you know what if I am I going would you like me to sum it up or can I go on?
Oh
What
no,
would you like me to do?
no, it's fine. Well, let me give you my perspective. I really appreciate your feedback, Rob. As you know, me and Spanish United, I do a lot of civil rights work within the Hispanic community, and prior to me going off the direct in 2019, but this was like a year before I started Spanish United, I was heavily involved in the Jewish community of Pico Robertson and over in the Valley, which has a large Orthodox Persian community. And as you know, many Jews employ workers that are predominantly Hispanic that do all of the work on Shabbos, because as you know, on Shabbat you're not supposed to work, but they come around it by employing goyim or Shabbos goy as they call it. So I've done many
Mhm.
intakes with many
Mhm.
Hispanics that were immigrants, predominantly immigrants, and many of them have told me, and again, I'm not emphasizing any stereotype, but this is the universal the feeling that many Hispanics feel that many Hispanic people that would work with Jewish employers, particularly like in synagogues and doing work like that, have told me that they have been exploited. Many of them have been treated not as equals, and they feel that they're not treated with the same respect that they should be getting. And then many of the Jewish um employers, and I'm not saying everybody, but I'm just saying as a general rule,
Mhm.
they tend to look down on people, not necessarily because they are goyim, but primarily because they're not the same status as they are, and that's what causes the resentment. It's not, I don't think it's necessarily a racial thing, but it comes down to economics. And especially with a lot of Jews that have become right wing because of Donald Trump and the war in Israel and whatever, and many Hispanics support Gaza and support Palestine. And many of them look at the United States and Israel as being imperialist, plain and simple. And many of them feel that they're being exploited not only here, but also in their home country that they have fled from. So I feel that the Jewish community has overlooked the anti-Semitism that is among immigrants. And many of these Hispanics that are immigrants can easily fall prey to radicalization. Not necessarily from Islamic extremism, but also from gang extremism. Like you have You have transnational gangs like MS-13, 18th Street, cartels, and many of them hold anti-Semitic views, and many of them could recruit these Hispanics
Mhm.
into causing harm to the Jewish community. So I feel that the Jewish community has a responsibility to dispel these things that are happening, and also they have to understand that another Holocaust could happen, but it can be prevented, and a lot of it has to do with the way people are treated, because human nature has shown that when you treat people with respect, even if they might not agree with you 100%, they'll respond in kind. But I feel that there's kind of like a disconnect between the Jewish community as a whole
Mhm.
and with the Hispanic immigrant community as a whole. And I fear that that might lead to a clash. I think I told you when I spoke to you, me and my mother, we've experienced prejudice within the Jewish community, and we are Jews. We are Latin Jews, but we are Jews. So I could understand where many Hispanic people, face the prejudice. So my question to you, Rabbi, is
Mhm.
like, what can the Jewish community do to offset the prejudice and to have a better relationship with the Hispanic community, both Hispanic Jewish and non-Hispanic Jewish?
Well, I think the point is I'm a great fan of dialogue, and I think both sides need to express where they are. For example, my wife is from Iran, and being expelled from a country because of your religion is something that it does taint you.
Right.
It does make you suspicious of everybody. And so I think that discussion with even American Hispanics who have felt that America has left them behind and not treated them with respect, I think that's a good place to start. I also think um, I'm gonna step out of rabbi for just a minute and go back to my teaching. The My Hispanic students didn't think the Armenian students were Christians.
Uh-huh.
And that's absurd. They are.
Right.
So I once had a thing. I said, "Who believes that Jesus is the Messiah?" And everybody raised their hand except for a few Jewish kids in the class.
Right.
And they literally looked at each other and said, "You believe in Christ? Yeah, you believe." And so I laughed. I said, "This is funny. The Jew is mediating between the Armenians and the Hispanics." And then we
Hmm.
all laughed. But
Hmm.
that's my point. People don't know history and they don't see the similarities. They don't pick up the Bible and say, wait a minute, the first five books are the same. That thing. We have a different situation with Muslims because the Quran is not exactly the same as
Right.
as
It's a separate
the
book.
the scriptures. So that and but I think you're right about looking down at people. Um, Imam's not the only one. I mean, there are Jews who look down on fellow Ashkenaz Jews.
Uh-huh.
We have this terrible attitude that my way of the highway, and for sure my way through the prayer book is better than your way through the prayer book, and you know
Right.
what I'm talking
Of
about.
course. Of
So
course.
I think that need to enlighten is how much we believe in God from those who are now. The other part, one we're not going to be able to do much about is no, that's not true. We will be if the Hispanic young people who have a left of center um, viewpoint and they realize how much in America, I can only speak for our well, I can speak for Israel too, have how much we all believe in left of center. Yes, the verbal ones, the people who are following Trump because he keeps saying, "I will get Iran, I will get Iran." That's the same symptom. They're just
Right.
pissed. Oh, pardon me, just angry to be expelled. But if we looked at the history of the social movements, that's why I talked about teachers and social workers and said, wait a minute, we all believe in um, social security. We believe in these things. We believe in a fair wage for everyone. But people need to be honest enough and say it. Now, as far as the gangs go, I didn't know what you said. Frankly, I didn't know
N-
how much anti-Semitism was in the gangs. I've taught gang kids when I taught in the East Valley,
Hmm.
Um, and I never thought about it, and it certainly gave me a hard time because I was their teacher. They didn't give me a hard time because I was Jewish.
Right.
So I never thought much about it. But if
No,
so, then
yeah,
maybe we need to.
it is a phenomenon that doesn't really talk that's not really spoken about, but there is anti-Semitism among Hispanic gangs. The same way there is anti-Black racism among Sereno gangs and the Mexican mafia in the prison system, the same way there is anti-Semitism among Hispanic gangs in that are transnational.
Well, okay. So, but the Hispanic gangs that aren't like, is it because of wealth versus non-wealth, or is it because of ideology? Or
I
the third part, which is the most complicated, is it because of Israel versus the Palestinians? And those are three different orbits that we need to deal with, but each one of them deserves our time. I mean,
right,
if a Hispanic gang leader, we need to rob this house, and it happens to be Jewish, he's not robbing the house because he's Jewish. He's robbing that house because they got money and we want it, and it's not fair. And that's legitimate up to the stealing part. The
right, of
second
course.
part, like I said, if we were Palestinians against the Israelis, uh, leader of money, youth leader of 1970 in Israel, the West Bank, the old city, all our leftist friends will leave us, and unfortunately he was very prophetic. So that's another issue. That Che Guevara,
Hmm.
I don't know, was imperialism. I don't. You not might know better than I do, but even Fidel, I don't. Fidel was anti-Semitic. I think.
Oh, we got disconnected.
Okay, so yeah, so
I'll go ahead as you were saying, Rabbi.
no, what I'm saying that the three areas that we talked about, find out from the gang leaders. It's funny you mentioned Soltrese. When I was teaching in the East Valley, I had students who were members of Soltrese,
Right,
18th Street.
right.
And so, I mean, they're men in their 40s and 50s now, and I feel very old. Anyway, okay, but I think, I mean, if you have a connection, I'm a great fan of call everybody together and sit down. No holds barred. I mean, you know, no holes, just talk, and let's find out with the idea that, it's funny. You reminded me of something with one of my gang kids.
Hmm.
He thought the Nazis were good. He was
Hmm.
blonde haired and blue eyed. His name was Angel Lopez. So he and another fellow kept saying, "No, the Nazis were right. The Nazis were right." So there was a mini series years ago called Holocaust,
Uh-huh.
and one of the episodes is they take a young lady and others special ed kids, because I taught special ed,
Uh-huh.
and they put them in the trucks and they drove it around and they gassed them all.
Hmm.
After that, neither boy said anything about that.
Hmm.
So I think there is a point to be made for truth, for honesty. The question is, most people who are involved in street gangs are not real happy to be very open.
Right.
I don't know if it's reachable. I'm willing to volunteer my time. You know, my Spanish is very limited.
Hmm.
But I'm more than willing to go and talk. And I agree with them. Some of our people are slumlords. They're
Hmm.
terrible.
Hmm.
And some of them are just evil people. This idea that if I pray 3 times a day, I'm going to be a wonderful person. But after services, I go out and mess with someone's life. It doesn't matter because they're not Jewish. That needs to stop.
Right.
And so that's where my head is at with it. I mean, but I'm very much open. Jerusalem is Jerusalem. I mean, my Josh is there, and he goes from one quarter to the other. He's sitting in one, but it's central to the three faiths. Certainly, if I can lighten it up a little bit,
Hmm.
I'm a thrift shopaholic, and I love thrift shops.
Hmm.
Many times I've been in my favorite thrift shop, and they'll tell me, "Gee, if you'd been here half an hour earlier, you would have been able to buy the Israeli stuff."
Uh-huh.
But all the Latin families got here first. It says Jerusalem, they buy it.
Hmm.
So that's maybe, just maybe, that's a good place to start. Saying it's near and dear to both of our communities. Let's talk about it. And of course, we can do, 2 or 3 minutes on Sabado and things of that nature. But I think you're right, and I think our community needs to understand that you can't hold the world responsible for all the badness in the world. You know, I don't want I don't ever want a Nazi to come to power again, but I can't blame the let me put it this way. You have to differentiate between ignorance and hatred.
Mhm.
And there's a big difference between it. And
Right.
we talked, you know, but I think your point about the left versus the right, the power structure in Latin America, it leans toward the military.
Mhm.
You have Jewish families who say, if either I'm going to be safe or I'm going to protest.
Mhm.
Um, I I haven't frankly done liberation theology in many years. So I don't remember if there was any anti-Semitism in liberation theology. I don't think so. I remember those, may they all rest in peace, those nuns and those priests who gave up their life for the sake of the people. I don't remember anything but pure, pure love, pure what, pure what God wants, and certainly what St. Francis of Assisi said.
Mhm.
Um, but there are Jews who have risen to power after the war. They came. Argentina is a great example.
Mhm.
Perón sought ex-Nazis and Jews because he knew, let's be honest, some of the people had received reparations and he wanted to build the economy of Argentina and
Mhm.
and so and the other part of it. And of course there's a whole other thing for maybe another discussion about
Mhm.
crypto Jews.
Mhm.
But that's not our topic tonight.
Mhm.
So how I as a rabbi would do it is
Mhm.
reach the commonality of our belief system and help people be more sensitive to both groups. Um, uh, and I think I hope I've answered your
Mhm.
question.
No,
Uh,
you have. And the reason why I bring that up because you actually brought up a very interesting point. Like you had mentioned that sensitivity is something that we have to be concerned about, which I think is true. But
mhm,
from what I have seen, and again, I'm just seeing, I'm just speaking from an observer. Is like many of the Jewish community within the Jewish community has gotten so sensitive, and particularly when it comes to the Holocaust is like many of them are insensitive to the sufferings of other people. It's like many Jews want to force people to accept, what happened with the Holocaust and be sensitive about it, but many Jews don't feel that they have to be sensitive to other people's suffering. So many Hispanic people have told me that they're tired of hearing about the Holocaust. And I'm not saying it to put anyone down, but that's what many people told me. And it's like, and unless we can come as a consensus as a people to understand that Hispanics have gone through sufferings in many ways in the United States, for
mhm.
centuries, I feel that, no consensus can be made, and that will just cause friction and it will cause people to just drift apart because it's like the Jews are not the only people that went through a Holocaust. Many other people have gone through Holocausts, but the Holocaust is the one that's the most well known in the 20th century. So we need to be aware that other people have gone through different sufferings, and that we have to be sensitive and have compassion. Like many Hispanics that come illegally across the border, many of them have died. That's like a silent Holocaust, and no one talks
Mhm.
about it. You have Hispanic people that are being exploited by narco terrorism, and most people don't even talk about it. And then you have, unfortunately, those on the right, as you know, because of the former president, um, they think that anyone that is critical of Israel is an anti-Semite, which is not necessarily the case, because you have people that are anti-Semitic, and then you have people that are anti-Israel. So, you could be against a particular system of government with not being against the people, but
Yeah.
many in the Jewish community equate anti-Semitism with criticism of Israel. Like, for example, if someone criticizes Israel, one is labeled anti-Semitic, and that's not good because if we silence people that think differently from us, that will create more resentment towards that community. So there needs to be a respective dialogue between both groups.
Oh, well, I think you're true, and I think the thing you need to do is both the I think that the world in many cases doesn't realize the centrality of Israel, and people have used it since 67 to draw a wedge between Jews, saying, I'm not anti-Semitic, I'm just anti-Israel. I think also if you, the other side, um, they don't ask, do you like Netanyahu? Do you like the Israeli government? So if
Hmm.
they just say, well, because we think Israel was attacked and has a right to counterattack, that we must agree with everything Netanyahu is saying. Once again, no one's asking the secondary questions. They're just asking the first question: Are you in favor or are you against Israel?
Hmm.
Well, that Israel itself is very complicated in that I get that all the time. Well, how could you like Netanyahu? And I'll be honest to your listeners, I don't. I don't. But around my house, we have discussion. I don't. I think he's taken advantage of the issue, and I don't think his goal was to free them. And I'll go on record with it. But
Hmm.
the point, nobody answers. Once you say yes, I think Israel has a right to exist, they figure it's carte blanche, and that's nobody's problem, but the media's problem.
Hmm.
We live in a world of sound bites.
Right.
I sometimes wish we could go back to just newspapers where people read,
Right.
or where the news was held up a day or two. But now we don't. It's instantaneous. This happened, that happened, and people go from there. So that's what I think has to happen. We need to have a dialogue where everybody asks not just a primary question or the first question, they ask the second, third, and fourth question. It's like polishing a diamond.
Hmm.
We need to polish each other's diamonds, and I really mean it.
Oh,
We need to where where
absolutely.
where all where Latinos are coming from. Also, if you took 100 Americans and you were saying what religion is someone from Latin America, 99% would probably say Roman Catholic.
Right.
Well, you and I know as well that that's just not true.
Right.
There's many different, and some of those evangelical movements make me ashamed sometimes. They are so pro-Israel, but people have this stereotype where we're beginning to live, unfortunately, in the time of stereotypical. I don't want to be stereotyped.
Right. Of course.
Um, no, but I am Jewish. That's true. I believe Israel has a right to exist. I sent the paper to you before we did the last podcast,
Yes,
and I don't
correct.
want to go there. But I want to see where we can understand each other, especially at the holiday season. It's not that far away. I mean, can you believe it? We're already at the end of October, and it's going to be in 2 months. We'll be at Hanukkah. And this year, Hanukkah and Christmas come out together. The first night of Hanukkah is Christmas Day.
Oh,
It is
wow.
so, yeah, it's so strange. But that would be a wonderful time to kick off a seminar. And I mean, obviously not Christmas Day because no one will come. They're going to be home, partying. And I agree. I'm going to be home. Well, I'm going to be riding with Burbank because I'm the only non-Christian chaplain. So
Right.
it's my day. It's my day to go. I mean, so, it's not happy for everybody. So I go there. But the next day or the next day, find a day and have. Wouldn't it be nice if Hispanics United organized a panel discussion of Judeo-Hispanic culture, and we actually went back to Spain itself, and then my topic, the conquistadores, and and
Right.
and then we go to 20th century and some of the socialist governments and some of the coup d'états, which are not my subject. But what I'm
Hmm.
getting at is, I'm a great fan of we all sit down, we get a cup of coffee, and that could be political because then what country did the coffee come from? I'm kidding.
Right. Of course.
Lighten things up a little bit. So we'll have soda or water. But what I'm getting at is we all sit down and say, at the end of tonight, I don't have to agree with you, but at least I heard what you had to say.
Right.
That's all. And just I don't, there's a saying in American history, I may not agree with my colleague. It's from the Senate, I believe. I do not
Uh-huh.
agree with my colleague, but I will defend to the death his right to say it.
Right.
That's what we
Well,
need to bring back. Yeah, as I said, be a Hispanic. I have an acquaintance, a friend who came across the border illegally, and when she talks about what went on with the coyotes, and she's a wonderful woman, has a wonderful family now, but she taught for me, and it's like whoa, because people don't think of it. They think at the end, but they don't
uh-huh.
realize how many thousands of miles. Or the movie, there was a movie about a young couple, teenage, brother and sister, kids. God, I can't
Hmm.
remember. And we would show it to our kids to teach them what it was like for the people to come. And they came, I think, from the Yucatan because they weren't speaking Spanish. They were speaking a native dialect, or maybe they came from further down from
Right.
Guatemala or Nicaragua. I can't think of the name of the movie. It's been many years.
Hmm.
But that was the point. No one, well, not no one, but unless you really make an attitude towards it, people need to hear that. They need to 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 hear what other people have gone through, and they're not, and that's the problem.
Absolutely. Rabbi, I was gonna tell you, since my Zoom is on a timer, I just sent you another link so that because I want to continue the conversation. So in case we get cut off, I sent you another link so that way we could continue talking. I just want to let you know beforehand, but before I forget, because I only have 1 minute left until the Zoom closes and I have to reopen it again.
Okay, so we're gonna close this one, and then I'll go to the other link. Is that what
Yes, and then we'll continue the conversation.
All right, want me to do it now?
Yeah, let's do it now. Let's make it easier.
Sounds good.
All right. Right. And as where we were leaving off, yeah, I definitely agree with you that you know, this issue of have and have-nots within the community has to be addressed because
Mhm.
many Hispanic people have told me that aside from Jews being like a minority within themselves, a lot of them see them as white people. So many of them see them as being part of the white power establishment. And then you have many Jews that have embraced white supremacy, like people like Michael Savage, people like Laura Bloomer, people like Ben Shapiro. It further creates a stigma that that Jews are against Hispanic people because they're white supremacists. So it's like we need to offset that. That's very important.
Well, I mean, that's exactly the point. We need to relate to those people as being a minority of a minority of a minority. I will tell you something, and I'm going to lighten it up a little bit if you don't mind.
Be my
When
guest.
when I was at Rutgers, we had Dick Gregory. I don't know, maybe before your time, but he was an African American social activist, famous for going on hunger strikes. And Dick Gregory came out, and I'm sitting in the balcony of the old gymnasium between two of my probably Catholic friends, if I remember correctly. And Dick
Mhm.
Gregory says, I have to tell my Jewish brothers to be careful what the white people are saying about them because they're not white. And these two guys looked at me and went, oh, that wasn't such a good thing to say. They really they
Mhm.
were not amused, but he was telling the truth. And but we Jews have a history of wanting, like all people, want to be part of the majority. And so that's the point. But we need to point out to them. That's why with something the former president says, I keep reminding people, listen to what he's saying. I forbid anybody from a Muslim country to come here. And how many Jews are still left in Iran? And they go, oh, so that's all. They're going to have Iran on their thing and they're going to say, no, oh, no, he'll change. No, people don't. And so that's where I think you're 100% correct. You have people who, shall we say, they think their stuff doesn't smell and they live in certain cities, Beverly Hills and so on and so forth. And they think, oh, I'm this, you can't touch me. That's not true. You know, I've lived through the civil rights movement. I've lived through this stuff.
Mhm.
And so I think you're 100% correct. We need to have communities get together and you know go to each other, especially um, what you're talking about. The Hispanic community feels the Jews don't like them because we're their minority and Jews are not.
Mhm.
Um, Jews forget, and in a way, it's not. the worst thing that people keep bringing up the Holocaust, because if you really look at the Holocaust, it wasn't the death camps were the last step. The early steps were isolating them, saying, you are not a German citizen. You are a different person.
Right.
And I'm sure the Hispanic community feels the same way. They don't
Yes,
feel
they
a
do.
part of America.
They
And
do.
so we need to remind the Jewish community that when I used to teach it, I always taught the four steps. Segregation and isolation. Um, I forget the third one. And the fourth one was annihilation.
Uh-huh.
And so that was the point. Um, another word for disease. But anyway, getting back to it. But
Mm.
that's the point. The Nazis, that's why that miniseries, Holocaust, is so powerful, because it starts in 1935 with the Nuremberg laws. Most
Hmm.
Holocaust movies begin with the beginning of World War II in 39.
Right.
Hitler Hitler had been in power since 33.
Correct.
And so all those things, it enabled him, especially it's interesting. He accused the communists of the Reichstag fire, he took control of the government.
Right.
And once again, it enabled him to pass all these racist laws.
Right.
So people forget that part of it. And as far as Hispanics go, um, I think I don't know if we talked about it, and this may be too controversial, so you'll stop me, okay?
Sure, be my guest.
The shooting of the children in Texas.
Uvalde.
Yeah, Vivaldi. I wonder if that had been a suburb of Dallas, if they would have waited an hour to go in. And every day I think about that. Every day I wonder about that.
To be honest with
And
you, with that particular case, I thought it was pretty strange because Texas is known to be a very gun-friendly state and everyone is armed to the teeth. And what gets me is that they sent about like 400 police officers to try to take down this one individual with the gun who
mm,
was armed with a semi-automatic weapon, but everyone was too scared to go in there. And the one that actually took out the shooter happened to be a border patrol agent. So it's like the police didn't want to take responsibility, so they had someone that they could actually put the blame on. And I remember when the mayor of Uvalde was there on a press conference where Beto, you know who Beto is, right? Congressman Beto from Texas.
mm,
Okay, he was
mm,
the only one that spoke about what was going on, and what really bothered me is that the mayor of Uvalde is a white man in a predominantly overwhelmingly Hispanic majority town.
mhm,
So it's like all these Hispanic kids were killed. The shooter happened to be Hispanic, unfortunately, but it's like the mayor didn't really care that the victims were Hispanic. It's like his attitude was, one of their own killed their own. So it's like it's not our business. But I feel that if the town would have been like in a more wealthy area, I think they would have responded quicker.
yep,
And I also believe that if the police weren't cowardly as they were, they could have at least saved a bunch of more children. I think they waited too long.
yeah.
And the
I
thing that gets me is that the police were heavily armed. You had like 400 people that were police officers, and they were scared of one individual gun. That just shows how incompetent the police is in the state of Texas when it comes to dealing with national security issues involving Hispanic people. And there was another
Yep,
issue a couple years ago in El Paso, Texas, where a white supremacist started shooting everyone in a Walmart because he wanted to start a race war between whites and Hispanics in the state of Texas because he believed that Hispanics were invading the state of Texas, becoming a predominantly majority group in the state of Texas.
yeah. Well, I think that's there. I mean, Art and Imitation of Life. There's a book called entitled as Texas by James Michener, one of the most eminent of American historians. And I seem to remember the last chapter or two deals exactly with what you and I are talking about. The facade of we're all Texans, when in reality there's a very strong white versus Hispanic attitudes. And that's what
Mhm.
struck me when I heard about it. I think that's exactly the point.
Yes,
You,
and there was another case not too long ago. So I didn't mean to interrupt you,
no, no,
where
go ahead.
the Attorney General of Texas by the name of Ken Paxton, he sent the FBI and the police to raid the homes of the leaders of LULAC, primarily because he didn't want them to vote. He used the Save the Vote Act that was passed in Texas because they're very anti-immigrant, anti-Hispanic in the state. So
Yeah,
he used justification, oh, I'm sending the FBI so that way we can prevent illegal immigrants from voting. Because this is the thing, it's like you have a lot of illegal immigrants from other countries that are non-Hispanic that are in the state of Texas. It's like
yeah,
if he cared so much about for preventing illegal immigrants from voting, why didn't he raid the homes of leaders that were Ukrainian or Chinese or Arab or whoever? Why the Hispanic people? And primarily because he sees them as a demographic that, the
yeah.
Texans are afraid that Texas will flip blue. That's the nightmare that the good old boys have in that state.
Oh,
And
I agree with you 100%. Yeah,
and
I
and
mean,
and they're going to use to fear mongering and intimidation to bring people to vote. I actually sent a letter to the attorney general telling him that what he did was criminal and that Spanish United, along with LULAC, are working together to have him removed from office because that's fascism at its core.
yeah, well, yeah, I agree with you. If you need me, I'll sign on. You
Sure,
know,
thanks. I'll definitely send you a petition. But getting back to we were talking about Latin American fascism is another problem
yeah,
where you have many fascist governments are taking over in many parts of Latin America. And then you have many people that are part of the elite that believe that if they align themselves with a fascist government, that they're gonna, you know, have it good, but that puts them at odds with their own people. Like you have many
mhm,
people in Mexico that hate the president of Mexico primarily because she's Jewish. They don't like her down there. Many people don't like her.
yeah. Well, yeah, and once again, because she's most likely aligned herself with the right, and I'm with you 100%. And what's that cliche? Those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. That's exactly what happened to the Jewish community then in Spain. In order to rise through the ranks, you had to convert and become Catholic. And of course, it was a pretend. And as I said, that's a whole other evening. We'll just have some fun historically with crypto Jews.
Hmm.
But that's the point. People want a way to rise above it. And sometimes it's dishonest and it's dangerous. And ultimately, it doesn't work because that's what
Mm,
happened. When the Inquisition finished in Spain, they routed everybody out. They said these are just fakes. Goodbye, and they either killed them or they forced them to go through other parts of Europe. So
right.
I agree with it now. How many? That's an interesting question. The illegal immigrants that you and I are talking about mostly are those who are poor, looking for work, looking for a home, or have been their land has been expropriated. But
Correct.
how many very wealthy Latinos, people, Latin Hispanics, are here on some kind of a student visa or something else, but have no intention of going back. And when the visa expires, they stay. But
Right.
once again, they're not poor.
No, of
So the
course not.
idea, no, but now it's a whole other issue because now it's an economic thing. Why can't we do as well as people who have been here? And
Exactly.
and on the other hand, the voting for fascist or for white supremacists is scary to us all because
Exactly.
it's not the country we want, and that's not what the country was built upon.
No, of course not. And this is a thing that I argue with many people on the far right. I have friends that are conservatives, libertarians, Republicans, those that are on the right. And I always tell them that human nature and human beings have shown that when their basic necessities are met, they are happy and they'll be able to deal with, what life gives them. But when people's needs are not met and then they are forced to leave their home countries, they do it out of necessity. And in many cases, many Hispanics are being forced out of their homes primarily because of failed policies. In Latin
Mm-hmm.
America, you have cartels that have taken over, you have fascist governments taking over. And then also you have the issue of communists. Like many on the far right like to argue that all of Latin America is communist, which is hogwash. With the exception of Cuba, in my opinion, Latin America's libertarian.
Mm-hmm.
So like when people rise up, when you have populist movements that rise in Latin America, they don't rise because they want things for free or they don't want to work, they want to live off the fat of the land. That's the argument that many conservatives say. I tell
Hmm.
them it's a reaction to a system where you have a minority of people, doesn't matter what ethnicity they are, as long as they are part of the elite, that hold all the wealth, all the land, all their power. Not only do they refuse to give up some of that power, but they want to hoard all the wealth and oppress everybody else. So it gets to a point that when you take a dog and you kick it so much, it gets to a point that it will lash out at you. Same thing when you take a stick, you poke it at a beehive, you poke, 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 and then the bees are gonna come and chase you. And that's what's
Yeah.
happening in Latin America. People go to communism or go to far leftism because it's a reaction to a government or a system that is not working.
Yeah, no, I agree. Capitalism doesn't work for everybody, and communism is, well, communism, the way I see it, is basically socialism on steroids.
Right,
If you eliminate the concept of the eternal struggle between proletariat and the other and middle class, then you have socialism.
right.
And that's the whole point. And people don't realize how Jewish socialism really is. They don't like to think about it. But that's what made it so attractive to our people in Europe, was because they were saying everybody will be the same. Later on, the Russian role model was basically Tsarism by a different name. Putin is showing it.
Hmm.
And that's the whole point. But right now, I can't see something wrong with 100, with the workers sharing the profits. We it's now not in vogue, but in the early 60s, before 67, when people said the only true communism in the world is a kibbutz, people went, "Ooh, so that's what it means." Yeah, except without the violence.
Right,
It is to everybody according to their needs, from everybody according to their ability to give.
right.
Be more Jewish than that. So, I mean, I agree with you 100%. Unfortunately, that runs afoul of capitalism, and it runs afoul of those who unfortunately are in power. You know.
Exactly. And what's interesting that you actually brought that up because a lot of people don't realize that when the state of Israel was established, its early leaders and the early immigrants were actually communist. And the first
Mhm.
country in the world to recognize Israel before the United States was actually the Soviet Union, primarily because they wanted a non-Muslim ally in the Middle East. And many of the settlers that settled in Israel were actually Russian Jews, or many of them came from communist backgrounds. Like
Yeah.
David Ben-Gurion was communist, Chaim Weizmann was communist, Karl Marx was communist, Leon Trotsky, Vladimir Lenin, all these people were communists. So there is a tie to communism and Judaism as in form of creating an alternative system. But this
Mhm.
is where, white supremacists and fascists have said that communism comes from the Jews because originally communism, the Bolsheviks were a communist movement originally.
Mhm. Well, that's the whole thing. The book, The Protocols of the Elders of Zion, was a book produced by the czars, people to show that Jews are, doing communism and prepared to take over the world. Well, nothing is more absurd than Jewish people taking over the world. That's kind of crazy. Um, but the point is, I agree with you. And so fascism, I'm not surprised with Hitler's stuff, because one way to stamp out communism in Germany was to persecute the Jews, because
Right.
many of them were leaders. The problem we ran into today, I'll be honest with you, is sometimes there are Jewish people who forget their Judaism for the sake of other ideologies. And we'll leave it at that. But that's part of the problem, and so I often wonder, where are you? And that's where you and I may differ a little bit. But I think we need to look at Israel as center, and then everything else close by. And people who try to divide us, you say to them, would you like living your life without an arm or without a leg, or pick another organ? And of
Hmm.
course they're going to say no. Well, that's what Israel means to us. And because I think you're second, I'm first generation after the Holocaust, it's very sensitive to me when people use that against us.
Mm.
Now, I go back to what I said before, but don't expect us to be carte blanche. Don't expect anybody in the community to advocate what some of the members of Netanyahu's cabinet are advocating. I
Uh-huh.
for sure don't. No.
Right.
And my background. I had a native Arabic speaker as my roommate at the university in Tel
Mm.
Aviv to help me. So I have a different attitude towards Israel Arab relations. And this is not for tonight. Tonight is
Mm.
for anti-Semitism amongst Latin America and
Right.
what we can do to be more pro-Hispanic. And the thing I think your mom said about certain synagogues not being as welcoming and as opening, that's something we all deal with. Not to demean what she's saying,
Right.
but just to say we have the same feeling. I
Right.
don't ever like being in a situation where I don't feel comfortable as a Jew.
Right.
And if somebody's doing that, then hey, but there is, it's funny. The prayers are not always the same. The words are not always the same between Sephard and Ashkenaz.
Mm.
And if you've been raised in one or the other, it's kind of strange when you hear the other because, wait a minute, that's not the right words. Yes, it is for that community.
Right.
So
It's
even
the minhag.
exactly, exactly. And so that's the point. Jewish law is much more flexible in general, but you have these rabbis saying, my way or the highway, more or less,
Exactly.
which is
And
interesting because halacha means path. So it's like my path or no path, that kind of nonsense. But yeah,
exactly, exactly. And
so
and
I
I
mean,
and I and I also believe you actually brought up an interesting point because I believe that, for example, if synagogues in general were to be more welcoming, particularly towards Hispanics that are Jews or that are crypto Jews. I remember when you spoke last week that the Jewish community should embrace
mhm,
um, Hispanics that are Jewish or want to be Jewish. It's the neshama that's calling them home.
yeah,
And I said it many times. Israel has so many enemies. The Jews have so many enemies. Let's say, for example, there's 60 million people. I'm gonna use this as an estimate that want to be part
mhm,
of Israel or the Jewish people. Let them. Don't exclude them because they look different or they may have a different history. And that's the thing that I see with many in the Jewish community that the Sephardic or the Hispanic Jewish history is a little bit different from the mainstream Eastern European Ashkenazi history because most Sephardic Jews didn't really go to the Holocaust, believe it or not. Some did, but
yeah,
not all. Many Sephardic Jews were in neutral countries like Turkey, Spain, and Portugal that were not affected by the war, and many of them were in Latin America. So most of the Jews that went to the Holocaust were primarily Ashkenazi. So many, and I've heard many comments from many Ashkenazi Jews that say, your history is different because you didn't go to the Holocaust. I said, that may be so, but we went through another Holocaust 500 years ago that was called the Spanish Inquisition, which is not really
mhm,
spoken about. And many of us actually had to hide who we
yeah,
who we were. While in the case of Ashkenazi Jews, after the war, many of them were able to adopt white status, while many
mhm.
Sephardic Jews are still considered people of color in many places. So it's like it's very important that we need to have a narrative where Hispanics and Jews could come to a realization that, hey, we may have different histories, but we in terms of persecution, but we have gone through similar circumstances, and that we could actually be stronger and actually more powerful if we unite as a people instead of trying to dominate the other.
No, that's exactly correct. That we don't have that many people now, and yet you're, fighting amongst ourselves. Give me a break. I mean, embrace the centrality of it. Yeah, the prayers are a little bit different. Well, I drive a Prius, and I don't know what you drive, Enrique, but that's the point. So what? So what? You're still getting you from one goal to the other, and I think that it's very true. We need to look at the whole saga of Jewish history to know that the Holocaust is still fresh to us because it was, World War II is over 80 years come May, next May, but that's only 80 years. So the Inquisition is older, but it doesn't mean you're right. It wasn't any less traumatic for the Jews for hundreds of years after. And that's something we need to all come to grips with, is that we have all lived, you know, um, anti-Semitism on a homicidal level, and
Right,
that's the
right.
point.
And
That's
and
that's
I
the
and I feel that, when Jews are able to embrace the Hispanic community and dialogue with them, I think like you have mentioned, it could open doors because there's many cases where many Jews have never even dealt with Hispanic people because many
yeah.
Jews tend to deal with white people only, depending on
Hmm.
where they live. So many of them don't know about Hispanic people or they only go by what they see on the news. Again, I'm going by stereotypes. So I feel that if Jews were to engage with them, dialogue with them, invest in the Hispanic community instead of trying to benefit exclusively, I think that could build bridges. Like I was actually having a meeting with five of my directors of Spanish United, and one of them was saying that, there's so much focus on the middle class, but there isn't much focus on the overwhelming poor, which is a good majority of the Hispanic community. So I feel
Hmm.
that if the Hispanic community that is overwhelmingly poor is included in many discussions and dialogues, I think that could create a reception for people wanting to work and deal with the Jewish community. Because right now, many
Hmm.
Hispanic people have told me that are Hispanic that they rather not associate with them because they feel that they're part of the problem of causing us harm. Many Hispanic people have told me this in private, and I think it's sad. I feel that we have to change that narrative somehow.
I think you're right. Dialogue is one, and look at the needs of the communities. I mean, I know, Burbank Human Relations talks about that all the time as well. So I think it's God works in strange ways or in good ways. So this way we'll continue with that. That may be a good place to start, because they're like 60 years and they have outreach and things of that nature. But that's just one. I think let me think about other places and other groups I know that could lead the way toward embracing and helping the Hispanic poor that maybe
Mhm.
we don't think about and stuff of that nature, you
Yeah,
know.
because they are the ones that are serving many Jewish families that are maids, that are nannies, that are workers, and many of
Yeah.
them don't feel appreciated. And me being of both ethnicity, being Hispanic and Jewish, I'm able to be in both worlds where I listen to both sides impartially.
I hear what you're saying.
You
And then
know,
yeah, and that's why you'd be a good moderator for bringing the groups together,
mhm. Like
and then
like
I
I
agree.
said, if there is a way that you could connect me with the Burbank Human Resources community,
You met
you
her.
said.
You met her.
Yeah, yeah, yes. But if there's a way that I could possibly do a conference there, soon, that would be great because that's what I
Yeah,
would
of
like to
course.
do. I would like to do a conference where I could have, Hispanics and Jews talk where they could dialogue and I could mediate between both groups.
All right, let me talk to her. Let me talk to Marsha. Okay, let me see.
Because
They're all
that's my job. My job is to bring people together and to bring social justice. That's pretty much what I do. That's my job description.
all right. I mean, I will talk to her and see if we can set up something for next month. I can't guarantee anything because I know she's going out of town, but I'll see what I can do.
No,
I
it's
think you're right.
fine. It's fine. Yeah, because I feel that the more we're able to have Hispanics included in dialogue, especially the ones that feel marginalized, I think that would
Sure.
help tremendously because many Hispanics that are from lower incomes have told me that they feel isolated and left out for many discussions.
No, that's where our emphasis must be we need to bring this center line for everybody. I think
Absolutely. And
that's
I feel that's very important that the more you have the working Hispanic poor engage, I think it will help them come out of their shell and I would help them to be less insular and able to pick up new ideas. Like I do workshops where I try to educate Hispanic people, particularly the working poor, on changing their mindset on things. Because many Hispanics feel that if you work 100 jobs, you're going to move forward. And working is not a bad thing, but if you're working a menial job, even though it is an honorable job, it's not something that you pass on to your children and your grandchildren. You do that temporarily. It's like you have to encourage your children to better themselves. And I think this is the failure that many Hispanic families have, especially those that come from a poor background, that they have the PM mentality that Education is out of my reach. It's not affordable to me. It's only available to people that have money or people that are Caucasian or Asian. It's not for
Mhm.
us. And
Right.
we need to change that mindset because I fear, and I said this before in many of my conferences with different politicians and congressmen, that the standard of living of Hispanic people needs to rise. And I have a concern as a civil leader that similar to what's happening in many parts of Europe, where you have a large Muslim population that is poor and it continues to grow, and the same thing happening here in the United States, where if you have a large Hispanic population that's becoming more marginalized and isolated and continues to remain poor, within the next 10, 20 years, or even 30 years, where Hispanics become a majority plurality in many places, they could cause civil unrest in many parts of the country. And
Mm.
to prevent that from happening, we need to raise the standard of living among working or Hispanics. That is vital for not only for economic mobility, but also for national security.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I agree with you. We all need to move toward the center and beyond. But you're right. And the way to do it is, preparing your kids by you having a good education. Let them have an education and going back to school. Maybe that's
Absolutely.
what the next step is to find a place so we could educate people for the exam, for the US exam.
Mhm.
I don't know about undocumented, but I'm sure we could work with people who could pass the exam and then the path to green card and citizenship.
Absolutely. I just want to see Hispanics move forward as the Jewish community did years ago. So I
Yeah,
feel that Hispanics have the potential, but they need that spark, they need that push, that drive in order for them to move forward and to reach their full potential. And Hispanic United always tries to encourage education because we feel that education is the passport to one's future, and not only for economic mobility, but also for community mobility
yeah,
as well.
I think so too. I think education is the key, and we now have the technology to do it almost into everybody's house.
Mhm.
We're zooming, but think about it. I when I was in school, forget it, this didn't exist. But now we have the ability to go to houses and educate almost 24 hours a day. And so I think it's important.
Yeah, same
I
thing
really,
with me. Like up until, when I was up in high school, like in the 90s, not too long ago, we didn't have Zoom or anything like that. So we had to do everything from scratch. So many of the younger generation after me is more privileged in that aspect, but they need to take advantage of it.
yeah, we do. We do. And we need the federal government supposedly has passed laws to make it less expensive and more available. And we just need to, get people to sign up so we can send it to them and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
And
I'm always a big fan of making petitions and having people sign it. Like that's what I do. I always encourage people to sign petitions because that's how you get your local leaders to listen
Mhm.
to you.
Yeah, I agree.
So
I agree.
anyway, we come to the end of our time, but I want to tell you, Rabbi, thank you so much for having this conversation. I know that it was a little bit touchy for many people, but it was a conversation that needed to be heard. So I really appreciate having you here on the show.
Well, thank you. Let's be honest. If you don't get people to go out of their comfort zone, nothing gets done. They need a little spark here and there.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Good point. So we'll be in touch. All right.
Definitely.
Mm.
And for those that are listening on Spanish United Radio, we are on all social media platforms. We are on Spanish United YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, now known as X, Instagram. And for those that want to donate to Spanish United, we are a 501, 503 nonprofit. Anything that you donate is used to help someone in the community. And right now we're trying to get donations because we want to help Hispanic families in need for Thanksgiving. So anyone that wants to donate, feel free to donate. And again, thank you so much for being on the show, Rabbi, and we'll definitely keep in touch and have yourself a wonderful evening.
You do the same, please. And you be safe and be healthy.
Thank
Okay.
you. You
Take
too.
care.
Take care.
Thank you.
Toda
Bye bye.
Rabba.